Kara Griffin was born in Texas and raised in Southern Baptist, evangelical, and non-denominational megachurches and private schools. After leaving the faith in the mid-2000s, Kara was able to pursue their passion for learning, traveling, and experiencing diverse cultures and perspectives. They hold undergraduate degrees in psychology, international relations, and criminal justice, a master's degree in dispute resolution and conflict management, and a PhD in anthropology. Kara enjoys working with secular community services that support other people who may have experienced judgment, repression, or other struggles related to involvement with religious groups. At RFR, Kara volunteers as the online programming director, board treasurer, and hosts the weekly RfRx talk sessions. Dr. Kara, how you doing?
Hey, I am doing great. How are you?
Never had a bad day.
Awesome.
Stealing
Well,
from
you're
Forrest.
doing better than me. Well, I am so excited to be here, and I'm excited to be here with y'all, with all of my people, and with my super cool co-hosts, Glenda and Daniel. Thank you for being here with me. And since this is our Pride Month celebration episode, I would love for both of y'all to feel free to jump in on the conversation at any time. And also, everybody in the chat, please feel free to jump in, talk with us as we go along in the chat. I do have some slides that I'm going to show, but I want this to be super informal. Think of them more as like jumping off points for conversation. So it's not a lecture. I give lectures sometimes about like sex and gender and sexuality. And I think we've had that before. So we're not going to do that. We're just gonna have a conversation. So if y'all are ready, I guess I'll go ahead and see if I can share my screen correctly. So tonight's talk is about pride, and it is not a sin. You know, sometimes pride is listed as one of the seven deadly sins, and I disagree. I think that pride celebrations and communities supporting the LGBTQ plus community are in fact life-saving. They are not deadly. They are the opposite of that. So we're going to just get rid of that harmful idea right now and go on and talk about why that is the case. And now a lot of y'all know me here and you've heard me tell parts of my story before, so I'm not going to bore y'all with the entire details of my whole life history, but I do want to go ahead and highlight some of the key themes that have to do with the ways that some fundamentalist religious groups kind of go to great lengths to create things like shame and guilt and self-doubt and even self-hatred among people who do not conform to a strict, allegedly biblical interpretation of heterosexual, monogamous, procreative relationships and cisgender identities. And I just want to call out the importance of accessing resources and community support for people who have been impacted by that. So my story is just one story, and I hope that all of y'all will feel comfortable to share in the chat and interact as we go along with your own reactions and your own stories. So I am going to go to the next slide, which has the obligatory childhood photo on it, because that is what we have to do in these. So there I am with my brother, whose face I have blurred out because he did not agree to be a part of this program. And we are dressed up in our costumes for not Halloween because that's demonic, but we're getting ready for what some people in the evangelical community either call Neowalla, which is Halloween spelled backwards, or a fall festival, because those are considered not demonic. And now, just for those of you who don't know, there are rules around this. You can't just wear any costume to Neowalla or Fall Festival. You don't want to invite demons in to the celebration, right? So you got to be careful. You can't have anything that's like actually scary. There's no ghosts, there's no goblins. I think skeletons were kind of right on the line there, because you know that you have some of those in the Bible, but you know, so what you're seeing here is I feel like this is just kind of representative of the types of ways that kids get kind of brought up in this community. So my brother there is dressed up as the soldier of God, and he's wearing the armor of the Lord as described in Ephesians 6, and I am dressed up as a cat because That is appropriately feminine, and not too scary, but just a little scary. And I should mention that we normally didn't have enough money to purchase luxuries like costumes, so my mom actually made the cat outfit, and she could actually sew. I mean, she still can. And we got a really good deal on the toy armor because, ironically, at the store, the belt of truth was missing from that set of armor. And, you know, some people might think that you can't go into spiritual battle without your full suit of armor on, but we were not ones to be held back by missing the truth or, you know, facts or anything like that. So we got the costumes. Oh, also, my brother is wearing there a shirt that I think is from the Power Team presentation. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with that, but this was a thing at evangelical churches in the 80s and 90s where these gym bros who were Christians would come up on stage and put on these shows where they would break things in the name of Jesus. So like they would come on and like rip phone books in half and like break baseball bats over their knees and like get everybody all pumped up, and there was like music and stuff, and it was like a big like workout program. But then of course, you know, then they would have the music and the lights and everything, and everybody's getting like pumped and, you know, shouting and stuff. And then, you know, it would get all somber and serious, and they talk about, now, you know, the reason we have this power is it's not our own power, it's the power of God. Now, I mean, actually, I think it was steroids, but the point of the show was that I don't know, God gives you the power to break phone books for some reason, but only if you work out a lot beforehand. Because believe me, lots of kids went home and tried it and it didn't work out. But anyway, there we are getting ready to go out as we have been trained. Also, a little bit more about growing up Southern Baptist in Texas. That image at the bottom of the screen, that may look like the White House. It's not. It's a replica. That is in Irving, Texas. It's the Trinity Broadcasting Network, or TBN stations studios in Irving, that they built actually on the other side of the parking lot from the church where I went to school for elementary and middle school. And we actually got to take a tour after they completed it. And they have a replica Oval Office also inside. But they told us something like it can't be the exact same size as the real one for reasons. I don't know if that's true or not, but they said it couldn't be. So it was like 1/12 smaller or something. I don't know. But anyway, that was in there with a whole lot of other expensive looking fixtures. So anyway, all this is to say, I'm hoping that you're getting a picture of the early childhood experiences that happen in, you know, Southern Baptist Texas in the 80s and 90s. Obviously, it was very carefully curated to avoid any mentions of unbiblical things, and that included, of course, you know, sexuality or sexual orientations or gender identities that were different from the biblical ideals for men and women. Also, sex education was not a thing that you got anyway. Also, as a side note, at that school, they actually used the Of Pandas and People textbook for middle school biology, which I know Rob, if Rob is here, I know Rob knows about that textbook. That was one that was sort of around, it was the center of the big debate about whether you could teach intelligent design in science classes in school. And basically the ruling was, well, you can't teach creationism in biology classes because that's religion, that's not science. So then they came back with, oh, okay, well, instead we'll teach intelligent design, which is creationism, but we're pretending it's science by calling it intelligent design instead of creationism. And they actually got busted in some cases of actually just like doing a copy and paste through the textbooks, where everywhere it had said creation, they just copied and pasted the words intelligent design, but nothing else changed. Anyway, eventually those were kind of thrown out. But at the time, it was the 90s. And so that's what we had. So the whole point was to, you know, make sure we didn't encounter any bad influences that might give us any ideas, and certainly not that would allow Satan or demons into our home. This was a fear, by the way, that took me years to get over because everything was a way to get a demon. I was really scared of demons for a long time. And in fact, little plug here for RFR. The most common thing that people call our helpline about is a lingering fear of hell. I feel like fear of demons kind of falls into that category too. And if you have that, you should check out some of our resources or call the helpline, and Rob can talk you down. You don't have a demon. It's not a demon. Okay, so this is just an incomplete sampling of some of the items that I encountered as a child. And by virtue of being near them or bringing them into our house, I almost caused our entire family to be possessed by demons. These were all things that you could get a demon from back in Texas in the 90s. We've got our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles here, which can give you a demon because martial arts are from Asia. Yep, no further explanation provided. The Smurfs. Oh, Furbies. I see you're holding up a Furby. I bet those were probably possessed. I never had occasion to find out. We had the troll dolls. I don't remember why those were demonic. I think someone started a rumor that they were named after demons, and so then we found out they were bad. Over here, we have the Buddha statue. One time I did yoga, and we found out that was also demonic. Cabbage Patch Kids, obviously, there was a big scare about that. This was during the Satanic Panic when I was coming up, for anyone that is not familiar with this stuff. Goosebumps, any kind of scary content. I don't know if y'all are familiar with these beads in the middle. Daniel and Glenda, did y'all have power beads?
Yes, yes, yes. I remember this specifically because I'm 30, 36. Am I 36? I can't remember. Anyway, I was born in 1989. And
Yeah.
yes, because any of those beads that you wore, if y'all don't remember past the age of the early 90s where this was a thing, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, they would supposed to give you certain emotions or feelings. Like one was supposed to provide calming energy and one was supposed to make you happy. And it was absolute nutso stupid, just a trend. It was just one of those like kitschy, hokey trends. But of course, the church of these, it had, of course, obviously there's racism involved. It's an Asian thing. And so it was seen as this satanic, like Asian witchcraft, elemental influencing your feelings type thing. So yes, I definitely remember those beads. And I had some too. I definitely remember those beads being like,
Yes.
they're not okay to wear.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Did you
was in
have them?
Geneva by the time that was a thing. We didn't even I don't even know what that was. I had koosh bowls. I mean, that wasn't the devil as far as I knew,
Oh,
but
yeah. Well, they must have been less strict at your
they
school.
really hated Pokemon. Like they
Oh,
caught
yeah.
us with Magic the Gathering cards, and I thought I was gonna get in trouble for the big titty elf ladies, but no, they were like, "Oh, what's this?" And they thought they were tarot cards and freaked out, like
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah,
My cards got thrown away immediately. Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
But yeah, I also had one of the power beads bracelets for some reason. But yeah, those were also evil. We had a black cat that I tried to name Isis one time. That was a really quick way to get a demon, it turned out. So we had to rename her once we discovered that that was how you get a demon. And I had some CDs that got burned because Bill Gothard at the Institute in Basic Life Principles teaches that if you listen to secular music, particularly rock music, you could get a demon because it has African drum beats, which are demonic. None of that is factual, by the way. But actually, and I will say, my Alanis Morissette CD did survive the purge somehow. I managed to get her out of there, thankfully. But all that is to say, there was a big push to make sure that we weren't in contact with really pop culture of any kind. And I think the thinking behind this was that it's not just about demons, although they did literally believe that you were going to get demons from all of these things. But I think the idea also was that if you don't allow your children to be exposed to sin and any of these outside influences from the secular world, then, like exercise or popular children's books, then they won't be susceptible to contracting the gay either, because that is, I think, believed to be something that is a sin that you get from the outside. It's not something that would be an intrinsic part of someone's identity in this belief system.
Right. It was just also that pop culture at the time, because the study of pop culture is the study of queer culture in a lot of ways. If you remember the shows that were popular at the time, because again, I'm showing my age of the transition of media and things that were trendy. As far as gay representation in media, Friends was a really big deal at the time because there was a lesbian couple in the show. And then there was
Mhm.
also Will and Grace, which had gay men in the show. And this was, in the 90s, and it was a super big deal. And so this fundamental pushback to exposure to anything, the trolls, the power
Yeah.
beats, the goosebumps, it was because that had the interconnecting web of just general pop culture, general mainstream media. There was starting to be more and more like, oh, there's a gay person in this show, and that person was a voice actor on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and therefore it's demonic. And so it's all connected. So in order to remove your children from these influences, you had to cut off all of them altogether.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it came
Yes.
down to in the yeshiva world too, because it's funny. Like I was telling someone in the chat, like they didn't know enough about Pokemon to know that there was evolution or that it might be demonic because the creatures have special powers or whatever. They didn't know enough about any of it. All they knew was it was non-Jewish, it was the Goyim, and it was not for us. They didn't know that there were gay characters on
Mm.
Will and Grace or Friends. We weren't supposed to be watching TV, period. It was the yeshiva community. If we could all go back to Poland and do live in the ghettos, they would have preferred that because we would have been away from all the influences, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I mean, that does sound like, something that's kind of similar across both cases there, where, yeah, it's pretty much just get you away from pop culture, from mainstream society, from anything that's deemed secular. And that will prevent you from being gay, apparently, which is in fact not how that works. Actually, the call was coming from inside the house, it turns out. That was unavoidable. Um, I let my mom know when I was about 6 that I was not a girl. That, by the way, did not go over well because that was not allowed. Um, and so from then on, kind of the central conflict in our household, from my perspective, other people in the household may have had a different perspective on it, but from my perspective, that ended up being one of the central conflicts where from then on, it was a constant project of making sure that I was, not allowed to look or act or think or feel or do anything that was not very, very, very traditionally heteronormatively, whatever, feminine. um, and straight. There was great angst about this in our household, and it was always associated with either demons. I have been told that I have the demon of gender confusion. We'll come back to that later. So I guess one of the demons got in. I think it might have been from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because I had a lot of those in the house. So that may be where it came from. I don't know. So one of the demons got through, I guess. But the idea was, though, on the one hand, that this is a demonic influence, but there was this other more sinister piece to it in that community, which is that it is one of the most egregious sins that you can commit. And I'll give a little story about how it was described in my family. I had a different family member tell us that she found out that someone in our family, who was an adult, by the way, had purchased on Amazon a book of photography. It was like regular black and white, tasteful photographs, but it included some nudes in it. It is not what I think anyone here would call pornographic, but naked bodies are considered pornography in this community. And she then leaped to the conclusion that now, as a result, I can't ever let him be around my children because he might assault them. And I was like, wait, how did we get to that? And the thought process was explained to me. Well, sexual immorality is something that you open yourself up to. And when you do, if you engage in one type of sexual immorality, that means that you are open to engaging in every type of sexual immorality. Therefore, if you look at pornography, you may also be a homosexual. You may also molest children. And these were considered apparently morally equivalent. If you would engage in one of these things, you will engage in any of these things because you've allowed the sin or the demon of sexual immorality into your heart. So we have right there, again, this connection of the LGBT community with pedophilia, with assault. with abuse of children, which is, obviously very, very, very harmful and very, very untrue. So that's a theme that comes up again and again. But let's take a little detour here and talk a little bit about. Oh, wait, first, I want to tell one more silly story about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So by the time my cousins came along, apparently they weren't demonic anymore, but one time they got caught like role playing like they were Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because they had this version, the version that you see on the screen. This is like the version that kids these days have. We had the older turtles. These are like the fancy new ones. So they had the new cartoon by then, I guess, and they weren't demonic anymore for some reason, because God never changes. But but our rules too. But anyway, they got in trouble for playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not because they might be demonic, but because one of my cousins was a girl, and all of the turtles are boys, and girls can't pretend to be boys. That's a sin. That's unnatural. Daniel, you're thinking of a question. What is it?
I'm just horrified by how concerned they are about it, like about these gender roles. Like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to vocalize what I want to say. So my issue here is that like they treat these mild infractions like diseases that you
Mm-hmm.
do one thing and it leads to this entire cycle of perversion and sin, and like I don't understand where it stops or ends.
It doesn't. That is exactly it. You make one misstep off of the expected gender roles or off of the sexual purity that you were supposed to engage in, and you have now fallen down to the very bottom of the lowest pit of immorality, apparently. Yeah, it's apparently it's okay to role play as turtles, but not as a different gender. Cross species role play is fine. Don't get out of your lane with your gender identity, y'all. It's disconnected. It's proportionally just doesn't match up. But this is the kind of thinking that's around it. And I'll show a couple of examples later, but I don't think that this is much different in these communities today. This is the community that we were in. We did the Institute in Basic Life Principles, Bill Gothard homeschool program, which for anybody that's familiar with like the TLC program about the Duggar family, that's the program that they followed. So it's kind of that level of strictness. And gender roles are extremely important there, because what is the role of women in that family? It's reproducing and obeying the husband. So you really got to be careful and not let them get out of line there, because, then the whole thing falls apart like a house of cards, I guess. Okay, having said that, let's take a moment now. We've talked a little bit about how they're going to these great lengths to make sure that you're not able to access even the media representations of anything that might remind you that someone in the world is gay. Now, why are we so worried about that? Let's talk about compulsive heterosexuality. So, it turns out, despite all of the sheltering and the religious indoctrination, there's another issue that kind of comes along too. It wasn't just that I didn't have the term non-binary when I was a kid. Like I told you earlier, I told my mom when I was 6, I'm not a girl. We didn't subsequently have a conversation about gender identities because those weren't options. There were no options. You were going to grow up and be a wife and a mother. That is your God-given job. That is your role. And part of the idea there, I think, is to literally take away people's ability to even consider that they may not be straight. And so there's this concept called compulsive heterosexuality that Glenda and Daniel, y'all might have more to say about this too, but it's basically the idea, it's attributed to Adrienne Rich, and basically is the idea that heterosexuality is not something that's intrinsic to humans. It's not a natural condition. It's actually more of a social and a political institution that supports patriarchy and domination of men over women. And people are socialized to think that being in a monogamous heterosexual marriage, for example, is the correct and normal and natural thing to do. And they don't give thought to the possibility of other arrangements because those are just kind of excluded from the conversation. They're not real options that are presented to you. So in many cases, sometimes people are surprised when they hear someone say, "Oh, I didn't realize I was gay until I was in my 40s." And they're like, "How?" Well, this is
Oh
one
yeah.
reason.
Oh yeah, I literally did not even totally confirm to myself that I was queer until I had sex with women and I enjoyed it. And it was literally after then we're like, "Oh, right. Okay. That means I'm not totally straight. I had this experience and I liked it because the default and I wasn't in my 30s, I was in my 20s, but the default is still like, oh, you're a girl, you're going to be interested in boys. Because I was attracted to men. Like I am still
Yeah.
attracted to men. I date men. Most of my partners are men, so I consider myself, like, oh, well then that's what I am. Like, no. And then you also, there's this like bisexual element where as a woman, it's okay to like make out with girls at parties for fun. There's a little bit of an intersection of once you get sort of past religion, but before you get into queer culture, there's this weird world of kind of the girls gone wild. Like you're allowed to like play around and flirt. And I kissed a girl and I liked it. Katy Perry-esque performative
Hmm.
bisexuality
Because you're
for the male gaze, right?
right. You're out of the religious restrictions on what you
Yeah.
can do, but you're still under
But you're
the male
still
gaze and the
totally in this like
patriarchy.
cishet culture. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
there's so much to say about that. But yes, compulsory heterosexuality, even for somebody who I was an atheist and I was out as an atheist and I had rejected traditional roles for well over a decade at that point, I think. And it was only until then when I truly, truly officially like, okay, no, I am queer. This is a part of myself and it's a part of my identity. It's compulsory heterosexuality, which my one other little side note that I want to tell about it. There's this fascinating phenomenon that happened during the pandemic with compulsory heterosexuality of a lot of people came out as queer while they were in quarantine because once they were not in social spaces as much anymore and were not with other people and consuming content on their phone or whatever the algorithm of like, wow, I'm somehow more and more seeing like before I had different content and now I'm seeing just gay content and I wonder how I feel about that. There were a lot of people that came out while they were isolated because they weren't in these forced compulsory heterosexuality spaces and able to reflect on what they actually wanted and able to come out as queer during that time. It's just a phenomenon I wanted to mention.
Yes. And I want to mention too also that autocorrect really got a hold of this slide and it says compulsive heterosexuality. I am going to
Oh, I
fix
didn't even
that
notice.
before our very eyes. I noticed it as we were talking and it started bugging me real bad. So sorry about that, y'all. I fixed it.
I grew up just thinking that everyone thought Tom Cruise was hot, and they just didn't talk about it because they didn't want to be gay. That was me for the most part. I mean, I didn't come out until I was out of the fucking religious community, and a lot of my friends were kind of surprised. They were like, "Wait, really, you?" Like, a lot of them don't have long dating histories, and I did, and I was like, "Yeah, no, I like guys too, believe it or not." So. I don't know.
Yes.
There were a lot of expectations because I don't talk with a lisp. I don't have a high-pitched voice, and I'm very
Mhm.
aggressive. I get things done. Like, yeah, like now I wear makeup and fucking, do this goth diva shit, right? But like seriously, like, for the longest time, I presented in the most straight way imaginable. So,
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because there is like this weird way that people kind of in a very, quick and not very nuanced way kind of look at people and decide, oh, okay, that person's probably gay, or that person is this. And I actually got that a lot as a kid. Everyone was always really worried that I was a lesbian. I can't imagine why. It couldn't have had anything to do with like the way I styled myself or anything like that. But I would get like almost bullied, as a kid for being a lesbian, which at the time I took offense to because, like, first of all, it was the 90s and someone calling you gay was, first of all, a generic insult, whatever they thought your sexual orientation was. But more importantly, I didn't realize that I was queer. And I was like, no, what do you mean I'm not? Because, like Glenda, I also was attracted to men. So I was just like, oh, okay, I must be straight, obviously. I'm attracted to some men, but other people were clocking me like forever before that. But the part that really I eventually clued in on was that when people would accidentally misgender me, and come up from behind me and call me sir, or just come up and say you look like a man, and I think they meant that as a critique of what I was wearing, which was usually like cargo pants and a baggy sweatshirt, and I had like shaved my head myself. So it was a critique of that. But it wasn't really until I was an adult that I got the term for that, which was, okay, the comment that you're seeing something about me that isn't straight, but you're not commenting on my sexual orientation. You're actually commenting on my gender presentation. And it's my gender identity that you're seeing coming out. But the thing is, I would always have to pretend to be offended when people would like accidentally misgender me, but I was never in my life offended by that. I was always like secretly like really excited and validated. I was like, oh, yay. And then like one time, the best time ever, I think I've said before, I used to be a cop. And I was in a restaurant one day because, that was probably part of my rejecting all of the feminine expectations that were placed upon me. And so I was in a restaurant, in my cop gear, and you're kind of trained to pay attention to everything that's going on around you. And so there was this family having a conversation at another table, and it was a mom trying to explain to her kid. I cued in on it like kind of mid conversation, and she's going, no, that's a lady. See, women can be police officers too. And the child like very loudly goes, no, it's not. That's a man. The mom is now realizing that that was loud enough that everyone heard. And she's like trying to like hurry and shush the kid. She's like, no, it's not. It's a lady. It's a lady. And the kid's like, it is not a lady. I'm like over here just like so pleased, like pretending not to hear anything. And I am just so validated. And, wherever that kid is today, I want to thank them for seeing me. You were right.
Kara, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just like, I went to a friend's wedding on Saturday, just 2 days ago. And it was a Lord of the Rings Hobbit themed wedding out in a field in Washington outside Seattle. And there was a moment underneath the tent at the reception. There were a few children. And this is my community, so it's a very queer, and we'll get into the community later, but it's very queer, very trans, very gender non-conforming. And there was a little kid who was with the other little children, and I think they were I didn't know them at all, but they were talking about one of the relatives, and they were saying something like, oh yeah, it was like them, they're a boy now. And the kid was like, well, that's disappointing. Like, but like properly gendering them later, but like, gosh darn it. Like, I was like, I was like, they're a boy now. Boo. The kids were all right. It was just, I had to go away to cackle about this. It was so funny where they just like accepted it and moved on and embraced it.
Yes.
Like, fine. Like,
yes, I know we act like, oh no, this is one of the other reasons that people act like, oh, pride is going to be so damaging. You're going to confuse the kids. They're going to find out about the gays and it's going to like mess up their brains. No, kids get it real easily. Like it's easy.
I'm sure it was like that's disappointing. I'm sure it was because they like enjoy doing probably stereotypically like feminine behaviors with this family member, and now they're like, oh, now I gotta like, which is of course like a very childlike view of an adult-like view for a lot of people of gender norm. No, this person is still, but in your own little childlike mind. Like, anyway, it was just a really funny sweet moment.
I love that. I'm like, oh, now we have to do boy stuff. We don't like boys. That's really cute. Okay, so we'll go on to our last little educational slide here where we have the genderbread person, just to like catch people up on, again, kind of this intersection of gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and sexual orientation. These are 4 different things. And sometimes we kind of accidentally conflate them together, but they are different things and they don't always all go together. They are depicted here as spectrums, and that's something that people will kind of have different opinions about whether that's the best way to describe these things. But just as this is a very simplistic rendering, we'll put it that way. This doesn't have all the nuance in the world, but for somebody that is struggling with like, well, what's the difference between you said you're gay, does that mean you're a they them? No, those are different things. Let's talk about it. So gender identity is the one at the top there, and you see it's kind of depicting identity as something that's inside the genderbread person's brain. That's something that's inside your mind. It's internal to you. It's how you think about yourself and your identity. And there's a lot of discussion about how much of that is based in different kinds of biological processes. We're not even going to go there. It's an identity. It's internal to you. And people usually identify as either a man or a woman or something else, which we could call genderqueer, which we could call non-binary. Non-binary is an umbrella term for anybody that's wondering. It's used by people who experience their gender identity as something that is outside of the binary categories of man or woman. And it can mean a lot of different things. It can include people who use other terms like gender non-conforming, gender queer. Some people just use non-binary by itself. There's agender, bigender, demigender, a lot of other choices under there, but it basically means you're falling outside of one of those two binary categories. And then gender expression right below that is how you style yourself outwardly, and that may or may not match your gender identity. It doesn't have to. There's not a one correct way to be non-binary, and there's not a one correct way to be a woman or a man either, right? Like there's actually a big conversation in the community between people who are kind of like, oh, non-binary, that means you're a tomboy, right? And I disagree with that. There's a little confusion there. I see Glenda has had an experience with that as well.
I just have a lot of non-binary people in my, I have several non-binary people in my polycule and extended friend group. And some of them are very masculine presenting and some of them are very feminine because so that is, for those who are curious, that's the gender expression. There are some that are more on one side or the other. And we have this idea that if you're non-binary, you must be this agendered robot who has short hair, and you cannot decide if they're people want to determine biological sex. That's the third thing on the list, by looking at someone. And it doesn't matter, and it's not what makes the person a person. Yes, that is why, even if someone is very much, their gender expression is one or the other, they're very feminine or they're very masculine, it's always still good practice to ask, like, hey, like, what are your pronouns? What would you like to be referred to? And you might be very surprised on some people, like, oh yeah, it's they, them. Like, I'm not, while I look like a big biker covered in tattoos and with a beard, I don't feel like a man. So I am not that. So it's always good practice to ask. You might be very surprised.
Yes. It's always good practice to ask and then use the pronouns that they tell you they use.
It's okay
easy.
that it takes work, but practice makes perfect. And one of the ways, just to give people a little PSA to start practicing, just generally start referring to people you don't know. Just start using they, them. Just practice that. Just have it roll out of your mouth on a more fluid basis. And you'll find that when it comes to, in really hard practice, of the people who do use, they, them pronouns, that it becomes easier over time. So that's a great way to practice. My personal opinion, if there's somebody you don't know, or you're just speaking about, oh, did you see what that person was wearing over there? Yes, like their outfit was really beautiful. Just start using it. It'll get a lot easier. I promise. You got this. I promise. You can do this.
Yes, it is possible. And it's okay to mess up. It's totally fine to mess up and be like, oh, I meant they, or I meant he. Like, it's fine. Don't beat yourself up over it.
At the end of the day, like, you know, like, all we can really go off is what we're seeing. And like, if someone is presenting in a certain way, they probably want to be addressed that way. And I don't know why people are so concerned with what's going on biologically. It's not important, you know?
Right. These are usually things that people use as signals to tell them what parts you have. And I'm sorry, I don't need to know that about everyone that I'm interacting with.
And another thing, and Kara, you may disagree with this, or Daniel, like, please let me know. From my friends who are misgendered, especially if they're non-binary, one of the things that they appreciate when they're corrected, instead of the person who has misgendered, like if I use he, him with Kara, or she, her with Kara, and Kara goes, actually, it's they, them. Instead of me going, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Instead of doing this over apology, thank the person for correcting you. Thank you so much. and correct, and shifting from being apologetic to affirming the grace and compassion. You may disagree, you may want an apology. I just have found for me, it's
No.
that if I misgendered, especially because some of my friends in their 30s or 40s have had a recent gender transition, and so I'm having to recently use new pronouns with them, and that might take some more practice. So if I've misgendered and they correct me, instead of, oh, I'm so sorry, oh my God, I feel so bad, I'm so sorry, I say, thank you so much for correcting me. And I thank them for the opportunity to grow and learn, and make it a simple, like, thank you, done, moving on. And some
Yes.
people
Yeah,
may not
no,
feel,
I love
some
that.
may want the apology.
I don't. I love that approach as well, because like I don't need anybody to apologize to me. I know what I look like. I know you guessed the best you could. And like 70% of the time, if people were gonna just guess, they would say she, her, and the other 30% they'll say he, him. And every once in a while somebody comes straight out of the gate with they, and I am like, thank you, we're best friends now. You see me. And I love it when that happens unprompted. But yeah, just thank you and move on. Because what you don't want to have happen is where you misgender somebody and then you make it about yourself and everyone has to come and comfort you and be like, oh no,
Yes.
don't feel bad.
Yes,
And
that's what it is. It's the reframing from instead centering yourself and your feelings to like centering the person and their feelings.
yes.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
really don't like to feel stupid, I've noticed. Like, it's a big thing, and like, it's unfortunate, but like sometimes it's as simple as going, I don't have those issues, but like I have a really good friend who's trans, and I didn't realize that. I'm not even gonna say it. There's a slur. I used it. I was like, I was saying that someone was watching, transgender porn, and they said, Dan, don't say that. And I'm like, you got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna argue with that person. They know.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. I know a lot of people, and we tell people, hey, it's easy, you can do it, you can use new pronouns, but yeah, I want to recognize too that terms do change. There are people even in the queer community who are not familiar with every single last term in the community. I don't know all of the right terms. When we were making the poll question for today, I was asking y'all, hey, did I leave anything out? Am I missing any of the letters? Like, it's okay to not know everything. Just don't be a jerk about it when someone tells you.
By the way, can I point out something very pedantic? Very
Yes,
pedantic.
please do.
So if you notice, on both sides of this spectrum here, if you're
Yes.
presenting as a feminine woman with female biology and you're heterosexual, that's a straight line right down.
Yeah.
And if you're a masculine man with male biology, oh wait, no, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. Homosexuals on the other side. Oh well, I tried.
Yeah.
I tried to be
You
funny.
tried. Yeah.
Whoops.
No, but like, yeah, but that's a good point about this. Like, everybody doesn't line up on one side of that spectrum or not. Your gender identity might be that you're a woman, but your gender expression is androgynous. Your biological sex might be female and you could be bisexual. Like, they don't have to all line up. It is often the expectation that I think on the first three that people will kind of line up, but that's not the reality. And a lot of times then too, people will assume based on your gender identity or your gender expression what your sexual orientation is, in the same way that they assume what your biological sex is. And they may guess correctly in a lot of cases, but the point is that that's not going to be correct in 100% of the cases, because people can be anywhere on any of these four lines. And what you answer on one doesn't necessarily presuppose then what your answer is going to be on a different one. So yeah, that's a good observation. Okay, so there we are with the gingerbread person. There's also another similar chart to this called the gender unicorn, which is the same concept, but with a unicorn instead of a gingerbread person. I just like the gingerbread person. Okay, going back to what this has to do with evangelical Southern Baptists in Texas. So we also had this Focus on the Family program. I don't know, are y'all familiar with Focus on the Family? It's one of those conservative kind of how to raise your kids in a good Christian way kind of groups. Not the point. These two tweets are not from them, but I have put them here because I was reminded of them. So the idea with some of these kind of family, it's kind of like that. You've probably heard of that. What's that book called? To Train Up a Child. the one where you make sure you discipline your kids as babies so that they know to unquestioningly obey you, kind of thing. It's that kind of conservative family value stuff. And they have a PDF that you can download off of their website called How to Talk to Your Children About Homosexuality, a guide for parents. And I've added these helpful illustrations that I was reminded of and chuckled about after reading some of the very unhelpful advice in this booklet, which I don't know if this is one in particular that my family used. The PDF that's online today is probably an updated version, but it has things like how to start teaching your kids about sex and gender at a young age, and it's divided up by age group. So it's got like for ages 2 to 5. It says things like, and here I'll just read a quote from it. Begin teaching God's design for marriage. This is for age 2 to 5. Begin teaching God's design for marriage by using simple Bible stories, such as the creation story, to show how God made Adam and Eve for each other and created the first marriage. You might use the story of Noah to show the animals, male and female, going into the ark. Even young children can understand that a mommy animal and a daddy animal together have a baby. Now, we all know, if we were here for Nathan Lent's episode, that that's not necessarily how nature works to start with, but I just couldn't help but chuckle at a couple of these Noah's Ark images that came from children's storybooks, where they have the two apparently male lions in the ark. So I don't know how that lines up with this advice that they're giving. If your kid's got that storybook, that may be undermining your message. And then we have over on the right a different Noah's Ark, where I guess they tried to make sure and not show two male lions, and it looks like we have a lion and a tiger couple together. And then the caption on that one says, "This one feels like an overcorrection." So that just made me laugh. But
the same gender too, man.
Right, like, we don't know. So again, just like with the turtles analogy, interspecies crossovers, this is okay. Just don't get out of line with the gender identity you've been assigned, apparently. But then they go into what to do if you encounter a pride celebration, and they even have an example of a real life scenario, and the scenario that's described is this: your family is traveling and visits a new city, because I guess your family wouldn't live in a city where a pride celebration happened. You would have to travel to get to it, because you're a good conservative family, I guess. It's June, when school breaks for the summer vacation. And as you enjoy the sights, you begin to notice rainbow flags, t-shirts, and displays, and your family sees some same-sex couples holding hands. You've stumbled into a gay pride celebration. Then your young child suddenly asks, "Why are those two men holding hands? Why are those two women kissing?" And then there's a series of possible responses that you can give when you stumble into this. And this is just an example of one of the ones that was provided. Not everyone follows God's plan for marriage, so sometimes two women will act like they are married, but they can't really be a husband and wife because they're both women. Sin has confused them. They need God's help to follow him.
I mean, they're not wrong there. They can't be husband and wife. I mean,
they're not husband and wife.
awesome.
That's true. They're not. So this is what you're to tell your 2 to 5-year-old. If you come across a gay pride celebration, those people are confused by sin. But of course, we have here, the example you're supposed to tell them of Noah's Ark, how that could possibly backfire too. But I know this was the kind of messaging that we were getting in our community at the time, because we did have not a similar situation. It's actually like way more egregious. I'll give you an actual real life scenario where we encountered this, where this was the first time that I recall our family talking about LGBTQ issues. It was when a family member of ours was getting married, and we were going to go to the wedding. And apparently, one of the in-laws, the relatives of the person that our family member was marrying, was allegedly gay. I don't know if that was true or not, but we had to sit down and have a talk where we were instructed to make very certain that that person didn't try to hug us, because then we would get AIDS and we could die. Yeah, that was the first time we talked about this issue. That is obviously not true. So that of course opened up a whole other can of worms, and this was the early 90s. I think that we were a little bit past the time that even that kind of thinking should have been still going around, but it was. And this just kind of again underscores the level of like deep fear and revulsion that is baked into this from a very young age, almost from birth. You're getting this messaging that if a gay person touches you, you might die. Like, it's that dire, which is horrible. I mean, absolutely egregious. And you may be thinking, oh, well, you know, the 90s were pretty bad. Well, let's talk about the Southern Baptist Convention and their position on LGBTQ issues over the years. These are some statements taken from their resolutions that they have. So for anybody that didn't grow up Southern Baptist, the Southern Baptists are arguably the largest Protestant denomination in the United States. And they have the Southern Baptist Convention is kind of like the governing body where they all get together and come up with their resolutions, their platform, if you will, their doctrine. And of course, the Southern Baptist Convention traces its history back to 1845 when it broke off from the Northern Baptists over what issue? Can anybody guess? Slavery. Yeah. Southern Baptists were in favor of it. To no one's surprise. So here are a few choice resolutions or memoranda or whatever they call them that they've come up with. The first one is from 1996 and the last one is from this month. And these are their positions on this issue. And this is the doctrine, that they are asking people to adhere to. And the first one says, and like trigger warning, these are awful. So if you want to step away for a second, we'll let you know when we're done reading them. But the first one says, even a desire to engage in a homosexual relationship is always sinful, impure, degrading, shameful, unnatural, indecent, and perverted. Even the desire. So we're here in the thought crime arena with this one. You don't even have to do anything to be degrading, shameful, unnatural, indecent, and perverted. Just the thought or the feeling. And then we get all the way down to, Christians should oppose it. These identities are inconsistent with God's holy purposes. And then, earlier this month, they voted on a measure to call for the overturning of the Supreme Court ruling that legalized same-sex marriage. And this was part of their larger resolution that was titled On Restoring Moral Clarity Through God's Design for Gender, Marriage, and the Family. So they figured out that gender identities are also unnatural, shameful, indecent, and perverted. Apparently, they got to lump those in now that they know about them. You're not allowed to have them either. So this is still going on. This is something that people are still going through that are in Southern Baptist churches that are growing up from the age of 2, if they're following, some of these protocols, learning these things about themselves. And as many of us know, even though you may be an adult, when you find out the terms that you best identify with and that best describe you, I think for a lot of people who are queer, they know they're not quite straight, from a very young age. I don't know if that was y'all's experience, Glenda and Daniel. It was certainly mine.
I just thought women were so pretty. And I just
I mean,
thought
they are.
that was just, I just had that's just what it was. I just had an aesthetic appreciation. And Mom could tell you the amount of drawings I could pull them up that I've done before on another Queer Talk, the amount of drawings I did. And some of this also has to do with like my own performative femininity, what I felt like women needed to be, what I saw archetypes of femininity. But pretty much I only drew women, and all my drawings of women, they're like have like boobs and cleavage and like focus on that. And I just like the way it looks. Like not really genuine. Like I do. And then later going like, oh, is this feeling, do I want to look like her or do I want to be with her? And sometimes those are the same thing. Like sometimes I want both of those things. And it took a moment to recognize.
Yes. Back to that compulsory heteronormative kind of ideals where if the option isn't presented to you, it may not be the first conclusion you arrive at. Daniel, did you have something too? I think I talked
Yeah,
over
I
you.
mean, honestly, I was never macho. I was actually a really small kid. I mean, I was tall, but I was lanky, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like my favorite superhero was always Thor, but I was always like I'm Peter Parker, and that was how I saw myself. When I got older and started wearing the leather jacket, that was a totally different kind of masculinity. So I don't know. My mother, despite becoming a religious fanatic, she retained some of her hippie past. She would encourage my little brothers to play with baby dolls. But
Oh, I love that.
it's funny though, but because yeah, that's awesome on one hand, but she would present it as in the most heteronormative way. She'd be like, "Well, they're going to be a
Oh,
tati one day. They're going to be a daddy, and we want them to take care of the babies with their wife someday." And yeah, it wasn't like a
oh.
dispelling gender norms kind of way. It was it's okay for men to do feminine things in service to their gender norms. I don't know. It was very,
Yeah,
yeah, so
it started out almost wholesome.
almost there. Yeah, had us in the first
Yeah.
half, right? Yeah, yeah.
But it's, and I do want to give some space for people, dare I say grace, for people to have a hard time getting that way of thinking out of their head if they grew up with this kind of intense programming about it, where like they don't mean to have the ick about people who are not doing gender the way they were assigned at birth. I understand that it can take some time to think critically about why you're having that reaction and do some deconstruction, but it can be done. It is possible. We can do it. So anyway, let's go on to okay, last kind of slide on growing up in the Southern Baptist Church. No story about that would be complete without purity culture, and true love waits. So I won't go into great detail about this because we've had this talk before, but that was obviously a big part of it. By the time I was old enough to not be allowed to attend sex education in school, I was well aware that I was not exactly straight, but I didn't know any of the terms or we didn't have the genderbread person or anything like that. We didn't have the term non-binary. It may have existed, but not in my world. But I had by this time in puberty started to realize that all of my guy friends were, getting muscles, and I sadly like was not developing in the same way. That was a blow. I mean, I've worked hard to get some now, but they're just not the same. It's not the same, but that's okay. But by this point in time, the messaging kind of shifts to, hey, now we're really worried that you're going to start sinning. And we need to let you know that you need to not do that. You have to be pure. And here's all of the ways that you could accidentally mess up while your hormones are raging and become not pure, which again, once you step off the sexual purity train, it's straight to the pit of hell. So how many of y'all had this book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye? Did anybody have that? It's by Joshua Harris. Okay, well, this is a wild ride. So this was a book written when this guy was, I can't remember if he was 21 or 23. He was very, very young, and wrote this book during this time of purity culture, which was basically so purity culture kind of refers to this abstinence only teaching for Christian kids that was real popular in the 90s in particular, but also after that, where the idea was you need to save yourself for marriage. You never do anything with anyone until you're married to your opposite sex spouse, for the purpose of procreation usually. And this book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, was kind of amplifying that message to even further heights. And it was marketed for teens and young people, and was basically, oh, this is also the same sort of group where dating isn't allowed. You should be courting. Which is, if you've ever watched the show about the Duggars, same thing. Your parents, particularly your father, should be arranging, who you're going to see, and it's for the purpose of seeing if you're going to get married. Usually very young, and you're not dating because that's a pop culture thing, and you're likely to sin. So you're never alone together, you're always chaperoned, and it has to have the blessing of the father. Basically your father has to transfer ownership of you to the man. If you're a girl, I don't know how that is experienced by boys, but that's how it's supposed to go. So this book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, took it a step further and was basically saying things like, well, even if you are holding hands with someone, you're cheating on your future spouse, and your future spouse is now, being defrauded, or that's more of a IBLP terminology, but the idea was that even if you are thinking lustful thoughts about someone else, you're cheating on your future spouse. If you like hold someone's hands, you're cheating on your future spouse. And so you need to just not do any of that, and just trust God and your parents to match you up to the right person, and hurry up and get married before you accidentally sin. Anyway, this book impacted a lot of people very negatively. There's another book called Pure by Linda K. Klein, who grew up in this environment as well, and went back years later and interviewed a bunch of her peers from youth group who also went through this True Love Waits and the purity culture stuff. And it's a really fascinating book where, she has long stories from them explaining how this messed them up ever since then, that even after they either didn't believe in this stuff anymore, or after they did get married to their spouse in a way that was approved through the whole process, they were so traumatized by this that they would like break out in hives at the thought of having sex with their spouse, because they had so internalized this messaging about how impure you were going to be if you messed up. People having panic attacks, people having conditions like vaginismus, where your body like literally locks up and rejects anything happening. And so this is also the program that teaches things like, if you have sex before marriage, you're like a chewed up piece of gum or a dirty sock, and, all that stuff, of course. And, obviously if you're gay, same thing. That's not, the correct type of relationship arrangement. So everything you're doing is bad. So long story short, I got married when I was 18 to a man who was a lot older than me, because I was really trying hard not to be a dirty chewed up sock. Well, that didn't last, and that's good. But I could have been stuck in that situation forever if I hadn't gotten the support that I needed to get out and to figure out that this convoluted mess of ideology was the thing that was trying to make me think I was broken. So I'm glad I got out from under that. And one final example here, and what I'm going to say is that Pride celebrations are, one way that people are able to encounter other ways of thinking about this, and to be able to think about their identity and their relationship and their orientation as something to not feel intense, debilitating shame over, that convinces them to marry someone that they feel that they have to, just to not be a dirty, broken, chewed up sock or a piece of tape that's not sticky anymore. And this is one of those things that can really be a lifeline for people to realize, okay, no, actually, there are other options out there, not just the ones I was brought up with. And I saw this this image today floating around social media, the one on the left. I don't know if that's from this year's Pride or if I just saw it on social media this year, but it's a person dressed up in multicolored Pride gear, holding a sign that's pointing at the Christian protesters, the protesters that are holding a sign that says "Pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall," basically telling, and it has a reference to Proverbs at the bottom, basically, it's the protesters that show up to Pride to tell people they're sinning. And so this other person has a sign pointing at them that says, "Statistically more likely to be a sex predator more than anyone here." And spot on. Spot on. And because we're getting short on time, I won't play this this clip from MSNBC. I'll put the link in the chat later if you remind me. But it's the clip about when Michelle Duggar, the mother from the family on TLC from 19 kids and counting, or however many kids and counting they ended up with, basically went on a political campaign where she did a bunch of robocalls telling people they need to vote against some proposition that had to do with allowing like trans people to use the bathroom or something. And she was on there saying, why would you want someone like that, coming in locker rooms with your daughters? You wouldn't want a sexual predator around your kids. Well, as we all know, a few years after that, it turned out that one of the sons in that family was a known repeated sexual offender, and of his siblings and the parents, of course, had not done anything about that other than send him to some kind of Christian camp about it. So, again, let's look at where the danger is coming from. Okay, so why should we celebrate Pride? Because community support saves lives. It gets people out of these situations where they believe, because of the indoctrination that they've been told, that there is something intrinsically terribly, terribly wrong with them, which is not true. And research over and over again demonstrates that it improves mental health outcomes, especially for youth, to have supportive community spaces where they can go and express their sexual orientation or their gender identity that is outside of the norm. And I can drop the links for the studies in the chat too, if you remind me when we get to the end. But also because you're allowed to have joy in your life, and you don't have to feel this shame that you were taught to have for no good goddamn reason. You don't have to carry that with you. You can let that go. That wasn't real. That was made up. You can drop that. And also because gender diversity is actually a normal characteristic in human societies. And if you don't believe me, you can believe this map. This is a map that I make everyone in all of my anthropology classes look at. It's an interactive map. I will drop the link to this in the chat as well from PBS. That is a map of gender diverse cultures around the world. This is not a woke thing that people invented 10 years ago. Non-binary people didn't just come up out of the depths of hell in 1996 to fuck with the conservatives. Actually, this is a real thing in human societies. And this is just a small representation on this map. And you can learn about the different communities here by clicking on those buttons, which I will drop into the chat. But if you are a gender non-conforming person or non-binary or genderqueer or any of those other things, you are normal. You are not broken. That is a normal part of human societies, and it always has been. It's not made up. It's not the woke ideology. It's not the gay agenda. This is just how some people are, and that's how people are. So don't let anybody tell you different. And with that, I do just want to have a final disclaimer at the end. Not all religious groups are anti-LGBTQ. I described one that is very much that way, but in fact, these are some recent reports from GLAAD, which is a good supportive network as well for LGBTQ plus folks, reporting on all of the incidents actually that have targeted religious communities in the US that were tolerant of or supporting the LGBTQ community. They also got targeted or attacked or had death threats made against them by some of the groups that didn't think that that was appropriate for religious groups to do. So there are people out there that are being supportive. They're not all this way. I don't want people to come away thinking that this is how everyone's church and community was, but if it's the way yours was, I see you. You are not imagining it. You're not exaggerating it. It is that bad sometimes. So some tips if you want to support your LGBTQ friends and community members. I know we had a lot of people in the chat say that they're allies and they're here to support. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting. These are some tips that came from the Trevor Project. It's specifically aimed at what you can do in school settings, but I think these are great tips for anywhere. So I went ahead and reproduced them here. And a lot of times people are saying, well, what can I do to be a better ally? And I think they're imagining that they have to do some like grand gestures that are, really difficult or elaborate, and you don't. You can do small things like introducing yourself with your name and your pronouns, which lets other people feel comfortable telling you theirs, and then use their pronouns. Things like decorating your space with items that signify allyship, like those pins that say you're safe with me or a little rainbow. Those are great. They let people know that they're safe with you. Don't tolerate harassment or bullying. Don't just stand there and watch it happen. Intervene if you have to. Report it if there's a place to report it to. Don't tolerate people using slurs. If you hear a slur, call it out. Talk positively about queer folks and integrate that into the conversation. Think of ways to bring it up. This is basic stuff, but you don't have to do something extreme to let somebody know that they're safe with you and that they belong and you're not going to attack them. So those are some ideas. If people have more ideas, please put them in the chat for us so we can add that to the conversation. And I've got a few resources here at the end. I just wanted to mention that Recovering from Religion has a whole LGBTQ plus section in our resources page that you can go straight to, and it has these resources that are listed below it as well, in addition to a whole bunch of others, several other RfRx talks where we've gone into depth in some of the topics that I hit on today, and lots of other things. So if you're looking for help, you're looking for support, if you're having any of the weird shit happen to you that I mentioned or some other weird shit, go check out the resources on the page, call into the helpline. You'll find somebody you can talk to here. We're not going to treat you like that.
All right. We do have some questions. Do we want to jump to that now?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, what is your best advice for someone who's trying to figure out what their sex or gender is and is just very confused? What is your advice for
Ooh.
someone to help them figure out their sex and gender?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing I would say is don't feel embarrassed or invalidated about the fact that you don't already know. We talked a little bit tonight about all of the reasons that can happen and that people can be made to feel that they don't have any options or they never had the opportunity to think about it or explore it at a time that would have been more natural to do that when they were younger. So that's not your fault. That's not something you did wrong. So it's okay to think about it later in life. And I would say check out some book. If you like to read books, I would recommend books or articles. The links that I posted actually to the Trevor Project and to GLAD and to Recovering from Religion. In fact, I'm going to grab those now and put them in the chat. I'm sorry I wasn't able to earlier because the way my screen share was going, I couldn't see it. I'm actually going to grab those. And each of those have resources too for people who are questioning. That is for some people what the Q in LGBTQ stands for. Some people use the Q to mean queer. Other people say questioning because that is not uncommon for people to be still trying to figure it out. So take your time, experiment, see what you feel comfortable with. Don't do anything that you don't feel comfortable with. Communicate with other people and get plugged into a community. Go to a pride celebration if there are any more happening like between now and tomorrow. But you know, even though it's not going to be June anymore next week, we can celebrate pride year round. And you can still get plugged into communities where you can get support and talk to people in the community and ask them questions, ask them about their experience. And that's actually a really good way to find out more, because sometimes you read something online and that's a little different from hearing someone's personal experience. I like to hear personal stories from people, so that was super helpful for me when I was coming out. I actually was in Japan at the time that I kind of felt comfortable enough doing a full coming out and telling everyone my pronouns and presenting a little bit differently. And that worked out great for me because I was actually in a completely different environment than where I normally was. So it kind of eased that change a little bit, but that's neither here nor there. Something that was really helpful though was getting plugged into the local community, talking to other friends who would say, oh yeah, we got you, come out with us. You know, we're going to go to a club that's a safe space for people who are queer or for people who are non-binary, or you can come with us to this space and nobody is going to judge you if you're trying out a new look or you're trying to talk in a different way than you used to or present in a different way. And people in the community may have a good idea for how to guide you. So make friends with other queer folks. We're friendly. We'll take you.
I just, I can't emphasize enough how much community, getting connected with my local queer group. I mean, my personal polycule, we get together once a week to like watch movies and just hang out. But beyond that, like I know that especially with the pandemic, We all want to be homebodies. I think even the best of us developed a little bit of agoraphobia, even when you were an extroverted person to begin with. I think we're all still in some ways recovering from this, and it can take a lot to like put yourself out there and go out and be in a community space and in physical proximity with others and speak to them. And it can feel like awkward, especially for a lot of us who are neurodivergent. There's just a lot of layers to this, but I can't emphasize enough about how the queer community has kind of been the gold standard of what it means to create community for decades and decades and decades. I mean, the myth that being gay or being trans or any of these things is just new and a current fad is patently false, because these communities have been getting together in secrecy to be safe for centuries of time. When photography was first developed as an art form, we have photographic evidence of queer communities as the second photography was on the market. Also, the other first thing we did was make porn. But, you know, the second, like straight people, the second it was on the market, we had photographic evidence of these queer communities that were existing all over the world in secret and in private. And this is to say that looking to them for the standard of being able to get together, to organize resources, to share resources, these are all incredibly important things. And developing not just romantic relationships, because of course that's what a lot of us want, but developing platonic relationships in community and just getting friend groups. The queer community is so amazing for that. I mean, they do like the Gay Hikers Association and the Gay Cyclists and Gay Choir and like the Lesbian Collective for helping resources with trans people. Like these are all like amazing collectives and that I would highly consider you checking out. There's so much to be said. And you would be welcome as an ally. Like I'm not saying please don't speak over other people if you're going as an ally. Don't come in there with main character energy, but you can learn some skills that I promise, especially the elder queers are going to be very, very, very appreciative and generally thankful for. So like if you're an ally and there's Pride event coming up, see if you can volunteer to do some cleanup. See if you can do that. So yes, I can't emphasize local community building enough. It's not all about drinking and partying, and it's certainly not all about sex. So I recommend go checking out what your local space has for you.
That's awesome. Yeah, Glenda, honestly, like I don't have a lot to add to that because that is very much my answer too. But I would like to add that, like, if you're someone who you're having trouble with, figuring out your gender or your sexuality, queer people do tend to be very educated on this sort of thing. And guess what? There's no one better to guide you across the river than an alligator living in the river, you know? So, yeah, I mean, when I was in college, I joined this group called the Purple Circle, which was a queer discussion group, and I met my boyfriend there. We've been together for 12 years, but more importantly, when I first came out of the closet, I found out that a lot of queer people don't like or trust bisexual people. And this isn't everyone, obviously, but there is a perception that they're posers or traitors or they're greedy. There's all kinds of ridiculous things that people believe. And I'm a very self-assured person, but this kind of hurt my self-esteem. And getting around actual, real queer people in this group was so healing for me because here were a bunch of, lesbians, gay, bisexual, trans people, all just talking about comic books and TV shows and oh, cool, and looking to date. You know what I mean? So yeah, we're social animals. I can't add much more to
Yeah.
Glenda's like answer because it was awesome. So that's my 5 cents.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of it within the queer community. I used this before. There's a phrase called our queer elders. And there's a reason why this phrase is so important. So queer elders probably, I mean, I don't know if there's an age cutoff. We generally consider that anyone over the age of 60 or 70, even beyond, who are still around and are open. And with the AIDS epidemic that happened, we lost a massive amount of our queer elders, and these are people who have been out and open, or some of them may not even be open, but they are still around as queer people and have been. I saw a post the other day that was trans women who had been, or just trans people, mostly women, but included some trans men who had been out in the 30s and 40s, some of them even the 1920s. So these are important people to learn about and the ones that are still around, is important to hear from them and what they have to say. I will say that there are some queer elders that may have some opinions that seem dated, and for a millennial or even younger, this can seem a little jarring, or like like some of them use the word transsexual, and that's not really a term that's used that often anymore. But there is something about their history that is important to learn about, and also what they went through of when they lived in a time where it was illegal to be gay. I think that that's really important to hear about. So in the same way that hearing from Black Americans, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when I lived in a segregated society and it was literally illegal for me to be in proximity with white people or drink from the same fountain as you. It's important to hear these things. So I recommend reading books, watching documentaries, checking out our resources page. Learning your queer history is so, so, so important, because there are some people like, why do we have pride? I don't understand. It's like, you need to know where we're coming from. You need to know where we're coming from. And you know what? Probably, maybe in 50 years, considering the separate, I mean, I don't know what the separation of church and state is going to look like in 50 years, but there may be a generation of Americans who like, I don't understand why we have to have atheist pride day, or I don't understand why we have to have, it's like, you don't know what we went from, like what we came through, what we went through, what we came from. So it's just something to consider.
Yeah. Well, and to follow up on that, not to like jump out of line with the questions, but I noticed there was a question that was asking about like what about when people ask why is there no straight pride? And I mean, you kind of walked us right into that. It's because that's every day. It's the same answer as, why is there no White History Month and Men's History Year or whatever. It's because we already have that.
Yeah.
This is for people who have been made to feel that they don't belong and that they don't get to be here at all. And it's making a space to celebrate that, yes, they do, yes, they exist, and yes, we're going to celebrate it, because that's not something that's normally happening. And of course, to Glenda's point about looking at the history of it, pride celebrations are what grew out of the Stonewall riots, which came from oppression and violence against queer people who were just trying to exist. And so it was a way of standing up to that and saying, no, we're not going to keep hiding anymore. In fact, we're going to be out in public and not be ashamed and not be embarrassed about it, because we do exist. So it's a way of asserting that existence and turning the script around, instead of the script that I got, from the Southern Baptist Convention about, everything you're doing is wrong. No, it isn't. So here we are, not doing anything wrong. And you don't have to have that for straight people, because that's considered the norm. They're already allowed to get married and be in public without, someone running up and attacking them for being straight. That's not to say that no straight person has ever been assaulted in public. That's not what I mean. But it's usually not for that reason.
Not for that reason. And
Right.
another one little thing that I just wanted to say when it comes to, especially as we're here for this talk, non-binary representation and by extension trans representation, is as an art historian, amateur art historian, I will tell you that one of history has been intentionally erased from you, and we lost a massive amount of history as a collective community during World War II. There was an organized effort by the Nazis that destroyed a massive amount of queer identity. So we had artwork, poetry, books, stories, photography. We had queer identity that was going back decades and decades, even centuries of artwork, of evidence that there was queer love of non-binary people, of intersex people, of trans people. And that was deemed not acceptable by the Third Reich. And remember, by then, like there had already been a lot of colonialization of conquering, indigenous places in other worlds. So Western cultures had already gathered a lot of this evidence in even, in other countries that were not Western countries of, again, these queer relationships, of these trans identities. And Hitler and all the Nazis burned all of this.
Yeah, that was the first gender clinic in the world, basically. It was in Berlin, and those pictures you see of the book burnings, that's when they stormed it. That's what they were burning. They were burning research about gender theory, transgender people, and queer people. Like,
Wow, that sounds so familiar. Where have I
yeah.
heard about that happening recently?
The first, as
Gosh.
far, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, the first recognized, our earliest recorded author by name, who was the first human being where we can attribute a writing to a singular person, was a trans woman. If I remember correctly, it was a priestess, and she wrote about her gender identity and gender queerness, and that was one of the earliest authors that we have in human history. But again, we have so much more. It's not a new thing. I promise it's not a new thing. It's been
It's
around for
not new.
a long time.
This
So
is a normal part of human
it's a
diversity.
normal part. And I highly recommend the lecture, the RfRx that we had with and I'm so sorry. I'm still coming across my month hiatus.
No, no, you're good. Which one? Who was
It's
it with?
about the sexual spectrum within the animal kingdom.
Oh, I don't think that one's up yet. That's the one with Nathan Lentz.
Yes.
And
Okay, okay,
yeah,
okay.
can't wait for that one to come up. I love Nathan. He is one of my favorite guests. Don't tell any of the other guests. I said I love all of our guests on this show.
Yes.
But I
And
really
so,
like Nathan.
so I highly recommend if you still have like I'm a little confused about transness, or I don't really know gender identity or non-binary. When this
Mhm.
is uploaded to YouTube, please go check it. The sexual and gender diversity across all living things is profound and humbling and inspiring. And we encourage you to embrace the spectrum that life has to offer. And when that's uploaded, I can't wait to watch it again because it was truly one of my favorite. And I don't mean to say it's one of my favorite RFRXs
I
of all time.
know. It was really good. I'm going to drop the link to his book. If anybody doesn't want to wait that long, they can read the book in the
We're
meantime.
catching up. We'll get there. Give it a
Yeah.
give.
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Okay, so when it comes to pronouns and talking about how to represent as male or female or somewhere in between, how do you navigate in languages that aren't English that use male and female for different objects? Because that's how their language works. How do you navigate that? They ask again. Um,
Oh,
can I
I
add one tiny teensy beansy thing?
sure.
In Japan, they actually have. I,
Uh-huh.
I wanted to bring this up, but we were talking about something totally different, and they have something called X gender in Japan. This is a cultural thing. So basically, they have a kanji that is saibutsu, which refers to gender and sex at once, right? So what people who
Uh-huh.
consider themselves X gender do on their social media sites is they'll put their seibutsu, that's their assigned at birth thing, but then they'll clarify male or female in Japan. So I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was very fascinating. 'Cause that's a cultural difference.
Yes.
They have a word that they just use for their and it refers to their sex and gender at once, which is like, oh my gosh, like that's so rigid. Like what the fuck, you know?
Yes. I love that you brought that up because Japanese is one of the languages that I had to study and am like very poor at. But also I just posted a link in the chat to a film called Queer Japan, where it's really good and you can find it online if you hunt around for it, about the queer community in Japan and navigating the space that is at once rigid in many ways like you described, but then in other ways people are able to navigate it and go about their lives, and as long as they're minding their own business nobody really cares. Yes, to answer the question, language is funny, because I've had people tell me in English that just like, oh, you're doing it wrong, you can't be they them because it's singular and that's incorrect English. Okay, first of all, you don't understand how English works very well because languages change over time. Pronouns have changed over time. We used to have a singular gender neutral pronoun in English. It fell out of favor. We don't use it anymore, the same way we don't use thee and thou and so on, because things changed. You and you. Oh, look, it's the same word for the singular and the plural, second person, and somehow we're not confused. We can do it. Languages change. But anyway, in other languages, Yeah, I recall in middle school Spanish class getting angry at the teacher when he told us about how it worked in Spanish, where, like, if you have a group of people together and it's all women, you're going to use the feminine. And if it's all men, you're going to use the masculine. But if it's a group mixed together, you just use the masculine. And I got really mad about that. I was like, you are erasing women. Why is man the default? And he was like, I can't change this for you. I'm teaching you grammar. And I was very upset. And then on the other hand, to your point, in Japanese, you can get away with not really gendering anybody. If you want to use formal language, you it is polite to refer to people, not with a pronoun, just using their name or their title or something like that. And you can go through your whole existence without having to really gender anybody. And I loved that. Um, it just varies. I think the main thing to me is that, language is a tool and we use it to serve us, not the other way around. Oh, okay. I will say one other thing. I did hear a really funny video from a comedian made a video. I think they were Russian, and they were talking about how in their language, and I don't know Russian, so I can't say much about it, but they were describing how they had moved from Russia or wherever they lived to the United States, or maybe it was the UK, I can't remember, but they were speaking English now, and they were non-binary, and they were saying, this is so much worse. Back home, it was very easy. I would just, use whatever, gender, component of the grammar that I wanted, and everyone was clear that I was, intending for it to be gender neutral. But they were like, but here you have to bring it up specifically. And they're like, and then, you walk into, renew your car registration and you have to walk in and be like, by the way, I'm non-binary. And they're like, okay, but we're just here about your car registration. And they're like, right, but I had to preface it with that because otherwise it's going to be confusing. I just thought that was really funny. Some languages are clunky.
Can I make a comment on
Yes,
the use of English, the plural pronouns?
please do.
Yes. All right. I heard what you said, and it's not totally true because you still can use them that way. And I bring this up to people all the time. So say you're working in a, I don't know, a classroom environment, and some student left something behind, and they told another professor with a note, and they say, yeah, somebody said you left your glasses. If they come back in, I'll tell them. I mean, it's one person. They know it's one
Yes.
person. They don't know who it was because they didn't give a name even. But you do that on occasion, at least in English.
Yes, yes. No, you're exactly correct. We already do this.
Yeah.
We sometimes use gender neutral terms. No, you're absolutely right. And people want to act like they couldn't possibly, but
Yeah, I get that
they
argument from
have.
people all the time who don't like this pronoun, quote unquote stuff. And I just give them that, and their brain explodes. Oh, you're right.
Yes. Yeah, they're like, oh no, I've been woke this whole time accidentally. I love it.
Okay, sorry for interrupting. Carry on.
No, that was great.
Yeah, words are about usage and they're defined by usage and nothing else. I consider myself kind of a grammar Nazi, and I'm just like, it doesn't matter, like, at the end of the day. Anyway, all right, so should we move on to another question?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, yeah, here's a good one. Any insight into why the term gay was such a common insult in the 90s? Where did that originate from? Just a culture of non-acceptance?
Ooh. This might be a better question for the queer elders, as I was pretty young in the 90s, but that was a cringe time. It was an insult. Like, it was a thing you would say, like, if you didn't like something, oh, that's so gay, not meaning
Oh
anything
yeah.
about its sexual orientation. That was just an insult. I assumed it came out of people being homophobic, but I don't actually know the origins of that. Do y'all?
I assume so too. That was like the thing you said in the 90s and early 2000s. You just called anything you didn't like gay. And I mean, I remember it. It was a big deal to see this on TV. There was an ad campaign that Wanda Sykes, as well as Hilary Duff, who were two celebrities, were part of to try to combat the calling something gay of saying, like, that's so gay. And they're funny ads, and I remember them to this day. They're funny ads of, it's like these girls in a clothing shop, and this one girl is trying on a top. She's like, what do you think of this? And then this friend's like, that's so gay. And the other was like, yeah, that's really gay. And so Hilary Duff comes out of a closet, as you were. She comes out of the changing room. She says, like, that's like saying, that's so girl wearing a skirt as a top. That was the Think Before You Speak campaign. Wanda Sykes did another video for it of just kind of rethinking, like, when you're saying this, it's anti-gay. It's, you're being homophobic by using gay as an insult. And it has changed, but that was the ubiquitous term. I remember this explicitly, clearly, when I was in middle school and high school. It was like the one thing, calling anybody gay. That's gay, you're gay, they're gay, that means bad.
So when I was a teenager, I have to say, as like a male, like surrounded by males, there was this terror that you would be gay or be outed as gay, and it was palpable. Like
Yeah.
if someone's mentioned, I don't know, I'm old. If someone mentioned Natalie Portman, everyone else would have to concur, or else you might be a gay, you know? And it was
Of
like
course.
I remember distinctly, like we were playing. It wasn't Never Have I Ever or any of those games. It was something like that though. And the one guy's like, "Well, I know that I'm not gay, number one, and I know that I can play basketball really well." And I remember thinking like, "Man, you are so hung up on this." And it was everyone. It was this insecurity that pervaded everything. And it was like like being gay was like this specter of and understand, like I was out of the religious community. This was just normal like society, you know?
Oh, it was world ending.
That's what
People,
I'm
Oh
it's
yeah.
saying.
really
Yeah.
hard to describe. If you didn't grow up in this culture, or you're younger than this, it is really hard to describe how world ending it was for any man to be considered gay. Like, you couldn't hold your girlfriend's purse. You could, I mean, still the manosphere, early days of toxic masculinity, and
Mhm.
the in the mid 2000s, when it became the, like the Dr. Pepper campaign. Sorry, I did a lot of like advertisement study and like gender normativity with advertisement studying.
Ooh,
But
that sounds
the
interesting.
No, it was like, I don't know if you remember there was a Dr. Pepper campaign of Not for Women. Do you remember the campaign?
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, I hate it.
I'm
Yeah.
And it
sorry.
was meant to be tongue in cheek, but just like apparently the Man Show was supposed to be a tongue in cheek satire show, people watched that show not watching it as satire. They
Oh
watched it
Lord.
I
because they
mean,
felt it was a masculine show.
yeah, I'm one of those cringe
Oh.
teenagers that would sit and watch it and giggle at the girl in the short skirt, like getting people onto.
They were called juggies. That was their name for the women who
Ew.
jumped up and down on trampolines. Sorry, Daniel, I completely
No,
like
Oh
no, I'm
went
not.
over,
no.
but I was just trying to say, like, you can't, the my guy friends have expressed to me, you can't convey properly the level of anxiety and fear of
Yeah.
being accused. There was nothing worse than being
Right.
called gay. And you would have done whatever. I I mean, it was just anecdotal, but I can imagine this anecdotal evidence is spread across to be statistical evidence
Yeah.
of, there was not an insignificant amount of unwanted sexual contact that happened for the
Oh
sole
yeah.
purpose of men. I cannot be seen as gay, therefore I'm going to force whatever this is because my male peers are nearby. I'm at a party and I have to prove that I am this paradigm of masculinity, because there
Mhm.
is nothing worse than being gay.
The irony is they were all watching wrestling. They were all watching men in their underwear grapple with each other.
Oh, that just kills me when people are like, I'm okay. Have you seen wrestling? Like this is sweaty naked dudes wrestling. Like we're pretending this is straight. Okay, fine, fine. I
Like
mean,
me
I
and
know
my
when you
friend
first
talking.
watch it, like my brother did wrestling. I mean, he did real wrestling in high
right.
school, like actual wrestling, but still, both real wrestling and fake wrestling. It's like, this is really gay.
It's awesome.
Oh, even in like I used to
Hey,
do Brazilian jiu-jitsu in my like cringe era of wearing tap out shirts. And doing the paleo diet and CrossFit. I'm sorry, y'all. I
we all
apologize.
have growth. Oh my God. my God,
You're
we
too
all have
cool, Dr. Kara. I'm sorry. I don't know. I think
You know
that's
what? This has
badass.
come full circle for me because I attend in Vegas. There is a queer wrestling collective called Pride Style, and it's you should check your local city. Pride Style Wrestling
Oh,
might have one in your city, and it's a bunch of. I spoke about this in the chat. If you're queer, some of us reclaim these slurs, but if if
yeah.
you're a fellow homo and you want to watch other homos being homos, you can like watch this where it's just this queer, amazing, like trans affirming wrestling collective. It's incredible. I
Oh,
like
I am
style
so
wrestling. Can't recommend it enough. They're like their mission statement is anti-bigotry and it's like Shakespearean drama. It's incredible.
I love that. I would be so for it because like even among the like very like homophobic, wrestling communities, or I can't speak for wrestling communities, the jujitsu communities, like there is an unspoken acknowledgement that everyone involved is like, kind of okay with it. Like they're like, we know this is kind of like, a little bit sexy. Like everyone knows what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring it
And
back to
it's
ye old
fine.
Greek soldier times.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
It's funny
Okay.
talking about yeah. Moving on, getting
Yeah.
back on
We're
topic.
we're we're at time. Do we have any more questions or should we wrap up and go to the hangout?
We can wrap up. Like we have one more question, but we can do it
Oh,
in the hangout.
we can do it quick. We can do it quick. It'll be like 1 minute answer. We each get 1 minute.
All
Okay,
right, cool.
all right. I will
Go with the
ask
question.
a question. Lots of gender and gender nonconforming folks use lots of different pronouns to describe themselves, more than I can really give examples of. My question is, how did you find that they them was the best way to describe yourself?
Oh, okay, great. So then I'll answer, and then y'all can answer for what your pronouns are if you want to. So yes, sometimes people call those neo pronouns. They're like different words, like Zer, that are just different ones than the ones we already have, that people will use. I didn't pick those for me because I just didn't feel the need to. I think that they, them are words that we already have, that are already very familiar, that do what I need them to do. They are gender neutral. People, as Rob mentioned, already use them on occasions when they don't know the gender of the person that they're talking about. And I think it's just easier to get buy-in. Some people are easier to buy in than others. But I chose those just because it made sense to me, just from a sense of it's easier. It was simple. I didn't put really much more thought into any of the others. I understand why some people use the others because they want to pick something that is more unique, that doesn't feel like they're borrowing from something that may have additional baggage or meaning attached to it, and that's fine. I'm fine with whatever pronoun somebody wants to use. That's fine with me. But for me, I was happy to just go with the ones that were already there because I'm lazy.
I know. I listen. I respect that. I totally appreciate that. I go by she, her. I did not embrace femininity or certainly performative femininity until later in life, and I was intentionally misgendered when in my youth as like it sometimes because I was not
Ugh.
performing femaleness in the way that people thought was acceptable. So I was a fair little gremlin tomboy, and now that I perform femininity at a certain level, it's much more, it's a lot easier for people to use she, her pronouns with me. I do feel very, very comfortable with she, her pronouns. It feels very right for me. I feel like my own version of femininity, which is not everybody else's version of femininity, having the short hair and being tall and these things that give other women some gender dysphoria and gender anxiety, I embrace and I love about myself. The only probably gender nonconforming thing other than like the short hair or whatever is my twin sister calls me Glenn sometimes, and I actually am fine with the name Glenn, which is a more masculine term. A lot of my dancing coworkers sometimes just call me Glenn as it's just a nickname, but it's seen as a male name. So, but anyway, I'm this is to say I love my pronouns. I'm fine with them. If somebody called me they them, that would totally be fine, but my pronouns
Yeah.
are she, her, and I'm very comfortable with them now, and they make me happy, and that's just what it feels to be comfortable with your gender.
Yeah. Oh, and let me jump back in again. Sorry, Daniel. I realized that I answered the question as if the question was, why did you choose they, them as opposed to one of the other pronouns? And maybe that wasn't what the questioner meant. I realize, as Glenda was saying, why she's comfortable with she, her. I prefer they, them because it is gender neutral, because feminine pronouns give me the ick, because that doesn't feel like me to me. So I prefer not to use them. It feels to me like someone is calling me by the wrong name, or assigning me to go do something that I don't want to do. So I feel better when I am not attached to the roles and expectations that go along with femininity, even though I recognize that there are some ways that I may appear feminine, and I may even do some things that are feminine coded. I love doing things like, I don't know, drinking wine and having a book club. I realize that is an intensely like feminine coded activity, and I'm fine with that. It's
I feel attacked.
okay.
I feel attacked right now.
It's fine. We're all individuals, and nobody is 100% at the like extreme end of any of those lines that we looked at earlier with the genderbread person. So it's totally okay. But I like they, them because it is gender neutral and doesn't give me the ick. Okay, Daniel, go ahead.
Okay, no problem. I did write bullet points, so I stay on target. So yeah, I appreciate you explaining they them, because I've wondered about that. It's not the kind of thing I'm going to ask about because it's none of my goddamn business. But words are, as a poet, like words are so important and names are so important because they anchor things. They give us context and they give us credence. And when we're naming ourselves and we're choosing our pronouns, we're lifting Mjolnir and we're claiming our destiny, right? We're claiming our personhood. So I would never question someone's pronouns because, frankly, that's them. You live your life without regrets. That said, being male is a monstrous privilege that I didn't fully realize until, I want to say, like, gosh, eight or so years ago, where this girl I was seeing told me, Dan, I'm kind of nihilistic about my gender. I don't really care about it. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you wear dresses and stuff. You put so much work into being feminine. And she's like, yeah, but if I woke up and was a man tomorrow, I wouldn't care. And I'm like, oh, okay. I have no frame of reference for this. She says it's because you're a man and you love being a man. You get pleasure from, like, your masculinity and the things that you do and can do. And I was like, I'd never thought about it because, yeah, that's the base of it. And like, yeah, I'm very comfortable being a man. I've never had a problem with it, really. That's my spiel. That's what I got.
Love it.
Trying to keep it
Love
brief.
it.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. All right. Well, I think we got to all the questions, and we can wrap up and go to the hangout. I will quickly wrap us up. Thank you so much, Glenda and Dan, for co-hosting tonight and being here for our Pride celebration. It was a lot of fun. And thanks everybody else for being here too, and listening to my long spiel and looking at photos of my childhood. Okay.